Welcome to the Regulating AI podcast. Join host Sanjay Puri as he explores the dynamic and developing world of artificial intelligence governance. Each episode features deep dives with global leaders at the forefront of regulating AI responsibly, tackling the challenges using AI can bring about head-on and enabling balance without hindering innovation.
Welcome to the Regulating AI podcast. Artificial intelligence, AI, stands at the forefront of technological evolution, with experts predicting that it could add trillions of dollars to our GDP, but it could also negatively impact our workforce and national security. So, how do we regulate it without stifling innovation? Our podcast features insights from various perspectives. We've had industry leaders, government officials, and heads of advocacy groups. Together, they address pivotal questions that are needed to create practical legislation. I'm very excited to have Kai Zenner with us today. Kai is the head of office and digital policy advisor at the European Parliament. I invited him on this show as it is very important to get different perspectives towards framing AI legislation. And we need to get a perspective on what the EU is doing on AI regulations. Welcome, Kai. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the Regulating AI podcast.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Wonderful. Kai, for our American audience, our members of Congress, their staff, think tanks, etc., can you provide an overview of the recently passed EU AI Act and its key objectives?
Yes, sure. So first of all, it's not completely passed yet. There are still votes among the member states in the council and also in the parliament. It still needs to pass the committee, and also the plenary. So all MEPs need to vote about it. But normally it's the case once a political deal in those informal negotiations has been struck, that then the voting normally takes place as expected. And this would mean that probably the AI Act will enter into force in the summer of this year. Then we have transition periods, so it will still take a little bit for European companies and US companies to really need to fully implement the AI Act, but of course everyone should already start soon. To your question, well, to make it very broad, the AI Act, again, is based on a lot of prep talks and the realization that with AI technologies, especially machine learning and deep learning AI technologies, there are certain new legal gaps that are so far not covered by our existing legislation. And the AI Act really wants to fill those gaps. And the AI Act is coming forward with a rather innovation-friendly approach, which means that it's risk-based, so that the AI Act and its obligations are really focusing on those AI systems that are posing either such a risk that they should be prohibited or high risk that they at least need to fulfill certain high-risk obligations. This, I would say, are the main characteristics of the AI Act. So always this balance of not harming innovation, stifling innovation too much, but still tackling those new risks that are so far not covered by our existing laws.
That's very helpful, Kai. So, Kai, in the US, we are still trying to figure out how to get legislation. There's over 100 plus bills in Congress, etc. And so it would be good to learn in terms of process. So just tell us, what were the biggest challenges that were faced in the process of formulating and passing at least getting to this point, the EU AI Act, that we can potentially learn from?
Yeah. So there are probably, or is probably a long list, but maybe to really focus on a few main challenges. First of all, it's really, as you know, you have the same problems in the United States. This fast developments in the technology sector, and especially when it comes to AI, it's making life for a regulator extremely hard because, for example, when the AI has been drafted by the Commission, no one knew about generative AI, foundation models, and so on. ChatGPT was not a big thing. It was not existing back then. So, and then when it was released, everyone was a little bit surprised. And we in the European Union tried to include some articles in order to really tackle with this new issue that is connected to AI. So this from the beginning was a really, really difficult thing that often things that you had an agreement on were suddenly overruled by new advances in technology. Another point is the AI Act tried to come up with horizontal rules for all AI systems out there. And this is something typical European, because we are always trying to bring forward those horizontal laws. But with AI, it's just extremely tricky to do it because AI is not AI. What I mean about it is that AI deployed in the transport sector is posing completely different risks than AI in the health sector. And coming up there with different rules is almost impossible. And there, I think the US approach is much better to have non binding AI principles in the AI Bills of Rights, and then complement it with sectorial legislation, sectorial adjustments, and so on. This would be also my advice to other regulators to not try to build a silver bullet that is solving all the problems because AI is just such a broad term.
So, Kai, if I may, at least pick up one of the points is your suggestion after what you have gone through with the AI Act to the US or other countries trying to get legislation done is go vertical, not horizontal, be more industry specific. Is that what you're kind of suggesting?
Yes, exactly. So if you are doing something like the AI Act, then keep it really broad and underline from the beginning that those horizontal rules will be complemented by sectorial obligations. Because again, you see it with data governance or the prohibitions to have biased data sets. Again, those things make sense in one use case area or one sector, but not in others. And therefore, I think it gives you more flexibility. And in the end, it's also better to tackle specific harm or specific risk if you have this horizontal plus vertical approach.
Uh, so have a horizontal plus vertical approach. So now, one of the concerns that we have in the US, and I'm sure you have it in the EU, is the concentration of AI power in the hands of few. What measures are in place in your proposed EU AI Act to prevent that? Kai?
Yeah. So we have a lot of points on transparency in the AI Act, which is targeting two things. First of all, we were very concerned that certain actors, players in the digital market are abusing a little bit their market power. And what we wanted to do is really accelerate information sharing along the value chain so that especially smaller companies, SMEs, startups that are creating those downstream AI systems that are being placed on the market, commercialized, and so on, that they really have all the information that is needed to fulfill the AI Act obligations. And otherwise, we have, let's say, now more concentrating on the end user, on citizens. We have a lot of transparency rules in the AI Act and also possibilities for the end user to get more clarity why, for example, a certain decision was being taken, where, let's say, a governmental employee together with an AI Act decided to reject an application for a public service. There, the citizen in the future could ask for information why this rejection has been taken. And also, when it comes to deep fakes, there are disclosure obligations and so on. So what the EU wanted to do is really to make sure everyone knows now AI is being used, why it has been used, and so on.
No, that's pretty helpful. From what at least we understood or we read, that there were concerns from a few countries to make sure that the competitiveness of EU-based AI companies on the global stage was maintained. So, are there strategies in place with this proposed act to maintain that competitiveness, Kai?
Yes, I would say so. So, of course, the AI or EU AI Act is really focusing, especially on the internal market, on making it work for Europe. But we are also having a global approach. There are a lot of points where we need to reach out also to other regions of the world where international alignment is being prescribed for the different member states and so on. And the AI Act is just an element of a very comprehensive AI policy strategy, which is all about international alignment, international cooperation, and also helping, for example, the global south in catching up in and also having access to certain technologies. Again, on that point, I think also or those obligations about information sharing along the value chain maybe will set a kind of best practice that other regions will take over, which then in the end will maybe enable a South American company to become more competitive because now finally this company also achieves all the information necessary to build a better product.
So, you're saying there are some ongoing discussions because, we are living in an era of global connectivity. So, are there plans to create a harmonized approach for AI regulations, especially as far as globally AI regulations are concerned? I mean, what are the plans or discussions that are happening in terms of that, Kai?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. And there, I see certain parts of the AI Act rather critical, but on this part, I really would underline the benefits because, first of all, the AI Act is built on international prep work in the OECD, in the Council of Europe, in the United Nations, UNESCO, ISO standardization, and so on, which especially from 2010 to 2018, did a lot of work, pre-discussions. And I would say when it comes to those common principles, there is a rather strong alignment, which you can now see in the Chinese automated decision-making law, which is the first AI law worldwide, by the way. You will find a lot of concepts and principles that you now also see in the AI Act, in the Canadian AIDA law, in the US executive order, in the Brazilian law, and so on. Then you are completely correct with your assessment that the regulatory approaches or the AI policies among those countries or regions differ. Of course, the AI Act is not that closely comparable with the executive order, but due to the fact that it's all based on the same principles, I think there will be, in the end, again, alignment when it comes to standardization, when it comes to the definitions that will be used, when it comes to the enforcement bodies. And I guess we will see a lot of activities again in the OECD, in the United Nations, but also in G7 and G20, where we saw now, for example, in the London conference, some common papers how to regulate foundation models. This, I think, is a really good solution and approach, and hopefully will help us worldwide to find, let's say, good strategies to promote AI, but also worldwide to tackle the risks.
Uh, Thanks. That's very helpful, Kai. So, let's talk about some of the ethical issues. So, how does The EU AI Act address ethical considerations, in the AI development and deployment.
Yeah. Um, on that part, myself and a few other people in the European Parliament, we were fighting to have even more in the AI Act. We wanted to have some kind of ethical standards or ethical principles that are really kind of indicating in the direction or in which AI systems, technology should be developed, but also deployed and so on. Unfortunately, in the end, there was not a majority for it because especially member states felt that too strict rules, ethical guidelines would stifle innovation. But nevertheless, we have now what I told you, those common principles that have been agreed on internationally, for example, from the OECD. We have them integrated in the AI Act, but just not so prominent like we wanted them in the law. So we have now, for example, for high risk systems, AI systems, this obligation to not draw back on discriminatory data sets. We have the obligation that for high risk AI systems, there should always be human oversight. For example, a doctor that is able to interfere with an AI robot that is doing a surgery, and so on and so on. So it's not super obvious in all cases, but ethical principles play a big role in the mechanism of the whole AI Act.
So, we talked a lot about the AI Act. Let's talk about uh, implementation and enforcement. Can you talk about the mechanisms that exist for implementing and enforcing it, and how will the compliance be monitored for the EU AI Act?
Yeah. So this is one of the points that I do not like very much. As I said, it's light and shadow, because in my feeling, the AI Act is creating a way too complicated system, which is maybe similar to the GDPR, to the data protection regulation from the EU, which also led, after it became applicable in 2018, to several years of legal uncertainty in Europe. And even today, there are a lot of points that are completely unclear for developers, for end users when it comes to data protection. The AI Act copy pastes a lot of those mechanisms from GDPR, which again will probably lead to similar issues. Maybe if I quickly should summarize the enforcement mechanism, let me start with the European level. In the European level, we will have an AI office, which is located in the European Commission, which will mostly focus on foundation model generative AI. Then we have the Commission and an AI board with member state representatives that are making sure that there is some alignment when it comes to the enforcement of the AI Act, that best practices are being shared, and so on. But the most of the enforcement and governance of the AI Act will happen on member state level. This is one of the big issues always in the EU, because member states have different interpretations of laws. Certain member states that have, for example, Google, Microsoft, and so on, headquartered in their country, of course, do not want to make them angry and leaving the country. So they are not enforcing that strictly. And this, again, will very likely happen with the AI Act. We will have a very fragmented and different interpretation of the EU AI Act, especially for the first years. Maybe just to make it a little bit more positive, the big difference now, and one of the key points in the enforcement of the AI Act, will be harmonized technical standards. Similar to ISO internationally, in the European Union, we have CENELEC, which is the standardization body, and they will build those technical standards that are outlining and specifying how you can create an AI system, design an AI system in a way that is compliant with the AI Act. And then companies could just follow those harmonized technical standards and basically benefit from a presumption of conformity. And this would make, if everything works, and they are also complementing guidelines and so on, this could make the compliance for companies rather easy. But as I underlined, it's a very complex system, and until everything is in place, it will take probably some years. And this is our big fear, that for some years there will be high legal uncertainty and unclear enforcement.
So, several points, and again, these are lessons to be learned from us, for us also in the US, is the member states are going to enforce, and as you said, they might different member states have different level of understanding, interpretation, or even level of expertise in many cases, as well as interest. As you said, there could be some large companies that would have interest. So that's because we also have many states that have legislation going on. But the question obviously is that, how will this implementation vary? One question that has come up in the US is to have testing be done, whether it's NIST or private companies, etc. Is there anything in the EU AI Act that talks about testing or certification at all?
Yes. So certification will be done by so-called notified bodies, which could be, I don't know, maybe in the future even be a company like Ernst and Young. But right now we have national notified bodies, TÜV Süd, DEKRA in Germany, and so on. They would provide that. Of course, certification is often coming for a significant price. So it's especially for SMEs and startups sometimes a bit difficult to pay those prices. And again, with big data applications in the GDPR, this was one of the reasons why especially smaller market players didn't invest in big data because it became too risky. The EU now wanted to help a little bit, especially those smaller market players, with concepts that you can so far mostly find in the financial sector, which is called regulatory sandboxes. Those regulatory sandboxes are let's call it a digital innovation hub. So it's protected space. It could even be a virtual space, but mostly is still a physical space where companies can send some representatives to, and where a national competent authority is supervising the development of AI system, also testing, where you have a little bit more flexibility, for example, when it's about data protection, because again, it's an isolated room. And it was complemented by an article which allows real world testing. So, together with the National Competent Authority, a company could even outside of this regulatory sandbox test uh, if they are fulfilling certain criteria, their AI system under real world conditions. And it sounds really, really, really helpful. It could be an extremely useful instrument for especially smaller players, market players. But again, all depends on the funding and on the readiness of this instrument. My feeling is, like often in the European Union, especially at the beginning, those sandboxes will not be ready, member states will not have money for it, and those bodies of course always need a lot of talent, and talent is rare. Talent can earn much more money at Google, at Siemens, and so on. So member states, countries will also have problems to attract enough talent to provide all those services for companies. But let's see. Hopefully I'm wrong and it will work from the beginning.
No, but that's very helpful. So, Kai, during the process, uh, did you have industry experts, researchers, and civil society, were they involved in the development of the EU AI Act? I mean, did you have many different stakeholders when we were putting this together?
Yes. So there, without now saying that our office did everything perfect, I think we especially were really investing a lot of time and effort to talk with everyone. We were talking with civil society, with universities from Germany, from France, from Bulgaria, from China, from US, from Canada, and so on. We were really talking with everyone. And then we were getting so many good feedback that in the end it was really a nice exercise, extremely satisfying, because in the end you saw, well, all of those actors have, for example, identified point 1, 2, 3, and with those strategies, maybe we are able to fix those problems and so on. So without the support from stakeholders, the AI Act would have been significantly worse. And I would say actors like our office, but also others, really created a kind of best practice how to engage and continue to engage. Unfortunately, after all those positive elements, unfortunately, again, was is typical in EU lawmaking. And I don't know about the states, but I guess it's something typical about lawmaking. In the end, it was a rush to finalize the AI Act, also because of the upcoming European election. And then even we in our office had less and less time to engage, and especially the European Commission were completely shutting down their doors, and they were not listening to anyone anymore. And again, due to the fact that AI is changing so fast, I think in the last 6 months, 8 months, there was a lack of consultation. Before, definitely not. But at the end, there was a lack of cooperation.
So, I mean, you talk that obviously rushing, and sometimes it happens here and other places too, because, politics gets involved. But, Kai, you kind of touched on something which is a big concern here is artificial intelligence is evolving on a monthly, daily basis. Before you were working on the AI Act, LLMs were not there, and then you had to account for them. Now you have multimodal, you have agents. There's also now talk about AGI coming in. So there's a very rapid pace of technological change. So how will the AI Act, EU AI Act, I understand it's risk-based, but how will it ensure adaptability to future changes and advancements in AI? Because that's something the US also has to consider.
Yes. So once again, we talked already about it. One of my biggest points of criticism is the horizontal approach of the AI Act. I think what with the executive order, with sectorial legislation, with the AI bills of rights and so on, the US is doing it better, because if you don't have those overarching horizontal binding laws, you are better capable to make quick fixes in certain use cases, in certain sectors, and so on. We in the European Union will indeed have this problem that maybe next year something new is coming up, maybe something beyond large language models that no one was really aware of. And then it would mean, if we really want to substantially change the AI Act, we would need to restart the whole negotiation process. And with the new impact assessment, with new consultations, and so on, normally this takes at least 3, 4 years. It's a principal problem that digital lawmaking has, that indeed, as you said, technology is not waiting for slow lawmakers to catch up. It's always heading away. One thing where the AI Act again is doing something really, really well is that we are, even though we cannot change the whole law constantly and making significant fix here and there is this instrument of delegated acts, which means that the European Commission can, for example, add a risk category to the list of high risk cases, or can prohibit it, AI technology or a use case, where certain, for example, elements in the technical documentation or in the classification of systemic foundation models and so on are being added or removed. Those things the Commission can in the future do via delegated act, which means that if they do it really fast with consultation and the Parliament would need to approve it in the end, they could manage to do so in 6 months, which means still not fast enough, but for the lawmaker, it's rather swift, I would say. And another point that we did, I think, really good compared to a lot of existing digital legislation, we included, and I was already talking about regulatory sandboxes, those mechanisms, but also other mechanisms and also advisory panels, scientific panels, and so on, to really have this kind of public-private partnership concept to enable stakeholders, experts um, to engage, to bring forward certain new realizations, certain new points that they really want the legislator to include. I think this will help a lot, but in the end, we still forever probably have this problem that you were underlining.
So, Kai, in terms of public awareness and education, which is very critical, what initiatives are there to raise the public awareness about the implications of the AI Act and the regulations set forth in the EU Act?
Yes. Unfortunately, this point again was not strongly covered in the AI Act. It should have been more, but the AI Act, as you underlined at the beginning, with the risk-based approach, with the product safety framework, is just conceptually not really focused on that. But there are some elements, at least in the AI board, the AI office here on European level, should do some kind of campaigns, not only for developers, but also for civil society. There is one article that tells member states to raise the level of AI literacy in order to make the end users also more capable of, for example, detecting deepfakes, how to react to deepfakes, and so on and so on. And beyond the AI Act as a legislative piece, as I said, there is a huge range of activities in the European Union per se, but also in member states and also in other pieces of legislation, like the Digital Services Act, like the terrorist content regulation, like the political advertisement regulation. And I think all those together would have the effect to significantly um, update the or raise the level of digital skills in the European Union if, and now this is a big if member states are willing to invest enough money. This is our big issue in the European Union, that whenever I look to the United States, I see, I don't know, billions of dollars are being invested in this research project and so on. Just to give you one number that I'm always angry about, the AI Lighthouse, which is basically the place where the top AI researcher of the European Union should be centered. They should do top-notch development in AI and so on. Their budget from the European Union is 800,000 euros, which is nothing. Every United States city has probably a higher budget if it's trying to enable AI developments, and this really needs to change.
Uh, Kai, you mentioned a couple of things which in the United States, this year is an election year. There's a big concern uh, amongst people, legislators, about this whole deep fake and the use of AI technology. And we've seen that recently. Obviously, we saw it with Taylor Swift and President Biden, etc. There are some countries in the EU also that are going in for elections, etc. Is that a concern there also in the EU?
Yes. One of our former parliamentarians, Marietta Schaake, she is now working in Stanford at the university and quite often publishing in the Financial Times and so on. And I think she is completely right. She is always underlining the high number of elections in key member states, in key countries around the world, and that this should be basically the main focus of legislators. And actually, I would agree with her that if we are talking about the risks posed by AI, it's really the most crucial ones. I'm not afraid that much or at all right now about AGI or other things. I'm really afraid about election interference, about trying to manipulate our societies, and especially if we talk about the democratic states. I'm very afraid about authoritarian systems trying to use AI to harm democracies, not only in the United States or in the European Union, but also in South America, in Africa, and so on and so on. The AI Act tackles it a little bit by certain prohibitions. And as I told you already, by those disclosure obligations. In Article 52, we have for deployers of AI systems that can generate artificially created content, the obligation to have a disclosure. This is AI generated, but two problems. First of all, which actor with bad faith will follow a law? None. So what do you do with those actors that want to intentionally violate laws? Laws are not the right response or not the only response. And the second point is the AI Act, and this Article 52 in particular has a transition period of 2 years, meaning if it's entering into force in the summer of this year, it would only become applicable in summer 2026. And this means all those elections have passed. So my only hope right now is that, and we are going back to one of your previous questions, that there is really international um, agreements and activities that, for example, on G7, G20 level, countries would come together and say, look, it's a really fluid area. We don't really know how watermarking, how disclosure should look like technically, but let's agree on priority actions 1, 2, 3, 4, and then see those actions in Canada and United States and so on. This is my big hope, because otherwise, I think it could become extremely risky for democratic countries in the next months.
So you're hoping that the discussions in these other venues like a G7, G20, or uh, will and President Biden, when he met with Mr. Xi from China in California, did talk about AI and its dangers. And I presume the UK AI Safety Summit also must have talked about this, etc. And you're right. This is one of the biggest, obviously AGI is down the road, but these elections are here, and, democracy is being challenged by some of these things. So, um, Kai, this has been fantastic. Our listeners, in many cases, are members of Congress, their staff, etc. So this is a tremendous input as they are working towards putting this together. As you know, it's a very complicated thing. Uh, this input is obviously very helpful, and I'm sure there are a lot of interactions between, the EU and other parts of the country. But really, thank you so much for taking the time, providing us the insight, and we hopefully can tap into you for future discussions as our path keeps growing.
No, of course. Thank you very much again for inviting me. And maybe to underline here, I was always in close contact with the US government, with the NIST agency, and so on. And I think now that the EU is concluding their policy making, time for international cooperation comes again. And it's all about, as I said, alignment and so on. So whenever our US friends want to reach out, they can call me, can call others, because we really want to make it work globally.
Well, we really, really appreciate that. And we will take you up on that offer of calling you and reaching out to you. So thank you very much, Kai, for being on this podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Regulating AI Innovate Responsibly podcast. You'll find links in the show notes to any resources mentioned on the show. If you're enjoying our podcast, please subscribe so you'll never miss an episode and leave us a 5-star review.